G'day YouTubers and space detectives, but today we've got a real interesting one. What looks like a plant on the surface of Mars, a living plant. It's not in flower, unfortunately, but we have some really interesting details here. Now, if you watched my previous video, which was this one, Mars Crypt, which shows an exposed burial chamber, I also showed it in this video, but only very briefly. So today I'm going to look at it properly. We're going to examine the close-up detail of this plant on Mars. Right, let me show you the raw image. Here's the raw image. And we have this sedimentary rock here, mudstone or sedimentary layers that have all dried out and cracked. And we have this thing sticking up just here. Let's go in a bit closer. And what I didn't show in the last video, which I should have done, is just below it here, we have roots going into the wet sand just below. Now what happens is, with these rocks on Mars, especially when they're sloping flat sedimentary layers like this, is that as it's very cold on Mars in the evening and night time, it gets very cold, moisture in the atmosphere then forms frost on these rocks, and then when the sun comes up the next day and warms enough, that frost then melts and then drips down off these rocks, as you can see here, onto the sand, forming a wet patch of sand. Now, of course, we're told the atmosphere on Mars isn't conducive for water to stay around for very long, and that may be the case, but it may not have to stay for very long. If it melts, that plant, this plant here, could actually drink the water before it evaporates or boils away because of the low air pressure. Okay, so let me show a close-up of it. I've got the actual page here. Here's the official page. This is Sol 1092, mass camera, Curiosity Rover. This image was taken back in 2015. And it's not the first example of a plant I've shown. I've shown a few. I'm going to show you a couple more in a minute. Very interesting they are. And they seem to be types of cacti. Now, that would make sense because those are desert plants, and effectively Mars is a desert because it's very, very dry indeed, and also very cold, but quite hot during the day. It does get up to about 68 and even 90 degrees in the summer in Gale Crater, because this is on the equator, or very close to the equator on Mars. And there's a bit of a sun trap as well. It's sheltered from the wind down here because we're 3 miles down below the surface of Mars. I've done a meme of it here. Basically, this is self-explanatory. All you've got to do is look at what I put here. We've got a plant here at the top, up here. We have, if you follow it down, we have roots coming out here and going in to the sand. It's getting closer. And we have a wet patch of sand. In fact, it shows a bit better on the enhancement here on the right. I'll zoom in a bit. You can see that root coming down. It's going right into the sand, just here. You can see it going into the sand, and it's drinking the water from this patch of wet sand right here. Okay? So we have a simple explanation. We have basically frost forming on this rock and then melting as it gets hot during the day. In the afternoon, it may only be hot for a couple of hours, but then it starts getting cold very quickly again, and then goes very, very cold at night. Even in the summer, it goes down to about -80 in this area. But during the day, it does get quite warm, quite toasty, in fact, especially in the summer. And the summers are very long on Mars because their years are almost twice as long as ours. So there we are. So this is not a new theory. A lot of people have suggested in the past, people from NASA even, that there is frost forming on the rocks, which then melts, and they have said that it is possible that it could be plants, small plants, and things like lichen and perhaps fungi, whatever, growing on some of these rocks. And I have shown it before. So they haven't officially announced that, but a lot of NASA scientists unofficially have said this in the past. So this is not a new theory, and it's not my theory. But what I do have here is an image which I think proves that theory to be correct. And this may turn out to be a very important image. Here it is. I mean, it's self-explanatory. And if you don't think this is a plant, well, let me show you some. It may well be a type of cacti, and it looks almost identical and has very similar details to one of these. Okay. Now, not all cacti have spikes on them. Some of them just have these knobbly parts, right? And I just looked up cacti on Google Images here, and in fact, it's very similar to this one. And this is called a San Pedro cacti. That's the actual type. Let me just select that. This is from some forum here. And there are loads and loads of types of very thin, long, narrow types of cacti. It may not be the same species, of course, because of course it's on Mars. But it does show, when you look at the different types of cacti, that there are hundreds and hundreds of different types. And a lot of them are quite tall and narrow, and often will just grow with one stalk sticking up, and then as they get older, they grow more stalks and spread in different ways. And there are hundreds and hundreds of different types of these. Some of them are quite, look a bit like asparagus, like this. Desert succulents, they're known as. Basically, they have water. They store water inside them, and grow in the desert. And that's exactly the sort of plant I would expect to see on Mars, because it's very similar to conditions like you might see in the Atacama Desert in Chile, for instance, which is the most similar desert we have to conditions on Mars, because it's the driest. But they do grow there. So there we are. All I've done is stitch the images together and made a gig pan. And there it is. And you can see it quite clearly in the raw image. We got a kind of asparagus looking shaped plant here, right, like a finger with knobbly bits on. You can even see those knobbly bits here sticking out. So there's some detail there, right? It's similar to the ones we have on Earth. Then you go straight down below it. We've got this ridge here with mud rock slanting down and split from the extreme weather conditions and eroded from wind. And then you go straight down here, and we have the root coming out here into the sand here. Right? Simple as that. Totally self-explanatory, really. Absolutely a very simple find this. Incidentally, there's something in the rock here that looks a bit like a calcified creature just here, with a leg here and eyes. But it's so small and thin, and there's such little detail here that it's impossible to say either way. I'll show you some of the clips I've got in the folder anyway. I'll run you through them, and we'll look at some of these a bit more closely. Here's the Asparagus Cacti, as I've called it. There it is. Not a lot of detail. I mean, these images are quite low res, but there's enough detail there, I think, to show that this could be a small cacti plant. You've got these knobbly parts, just like the one I showed you from Earth. There's got a bit of a point to it, and there it is. Now, initially, when I first published this the other day in my previous video, I clipped the image too high up. I didn't show the whole thing. So this is what I've done, and here's the enhancement I've got, showing the whole thing here, without all the text on it, so we can see it a bit more clearly. There we are. What else can I say? We have water, we have these white roots coming down here into the sand, and then above we have a plant. What more could he wish for? A sign that there is some hope, I think, in these difficult times. And in the enhancement, it's gone very white. That it's gone much brighter. Obviously, I've brightened it. You can see this coming down into the sand here, and then it disappears behind this sand and these sedimentary rocks here, and then comes up here. So there we are. What else can I say? And there are many areas in Gale Crater especially that we've seen photographs of with wet sand. And in fact, I'll show you some more very quickly after I've shown you this. There was this thing I found a while ago. I think this was something I published about a year or two ago. This looks like it could be a cacti, but may also be an insect mound or something similar. But it does seem to have these kind of textures to it, which dictates to me that this could be some kind of plant. I don't know what sort of plant it is. It could be another type of cacti. Of course, on Mars, there may be very different types of cacti, which we wouldn't recognise. So if you see anything like this on Mars, give it a closer look, because it may just be. Okay? Look at these texture details on it and the way it sticks up. Very strange indeed. And it's very different from all the rocks in the area. None of them have this texture in this particular area. This is the only one, probably for about 50 or 100 meters. So there are occasional things that crop up like this in the images that look very much like plants. Unfortunately, a lot of them are in black and white, so we don't have any colours. This may well be green for all we know. We have no way of saying what colour it is, unfortunately. So that's a shame. But there are other examples of wet sand. I'm just going to show you some here from another set of images, which I had this published in the press years ago, probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And this is a thing that looks like a crocodile on the ridgeline. But I'm just going to show you that this wet sand is everywhere. And in fact, I've got some clips of it here as well. I'll very quickly show you that. This is a much larger ridge, and we have the base of Mount Sharp in the background here. This is a completely raw image. We've got some very interesting things behind it in the lake bed here on this ridge that look like intelligent structures as well. Okay, but we're not going to look at those today. This ridge line is, I call this Crocodile Ridge, because we have this thing that looks like a crocodile. It may not be a crocodile, but it looks like one. Just here. But if you look below, we've got all this wet sand. And in some areas, there's loads of it. But this is a good example. There's another patch here, a darker patch. So basically, this is all over Gale Crater. And wherever we have these ridges, we have drip marks in the sand where the water has melted off from the frost and then run down into the sand, and as it comes down it gets paler. Some of it's quite dark. We've got these dark bits here, look. But in fact, the crocodile was something I got in the press. There are articles about this. I sent this to the newspapers and they actually printed it years ago. Here's the thing I sent to the press. I sent them a double image like that, showing it. And it's even got teeth, what look like teeth in the same place on the outer part of the maxilla here. Just here, look, sticking up. Absolutely mental. But I doubt it's alive. We have examples of wet sand all over Gale Crater. So that is not an issue. And it's not even an argument against that, I don't think. So there's no doubt at all that this is wet sand here, because there are thousands of examples of it all over these images. And many people have published them on other channels as well as mine. So there we are. And the Gigapan, let's look at the rest of it. The most of it is we've just got these layers and layers of mud rock here, sedimentary layers. And very fine they are, a lot of them. And we have some of these white deposits. Some of this may be calcium carbonate, chalk. Now we all know what chalk is, don't we? Or if we don't, we should, because chalk is a sign of previous life, and there's lots of it in Gale Crater. Calcium carbonate is made from millions of dead sea creatures, and as they all get compressed, all the bone material and calcium forms a white layer. Okay, so that in itself is probably evidence of previous life. But this, I think, is one of the best finds that I've found in recent years. It may not be the most exciting, like some of the skulls and remains I've found, or some of the vehicles I've shown, or buildings like pyramids, but I think it's very conclusive. And in fact, there seems to be another patch of water just there, nearby. So it's dripping off these rocks here, straight onto this sand. And some of these little things here may even be roots as well. Who knows? They're not very clear, these, but who knows what those are. So, are there plants on Mars? Yes. Are there living plants on Mars? Well, it looks like we have one right here. Okay? So there we are. This one was a bit too long, but it is very similar. This one here. But I wouldn't expect an exact match because, of course, it's an alien planet. And if you don't think there is water on Mars, there's plenty of images of huge streaks of water coming off some of the mountainsides on Mars. So there's no doubt about that. And it's been all over the press recently. In the last couple of years, they've actually said and admitted now that there may be liquid water at some points on the surface. But only momentarily. It may only last for a number of hours or even minutes. But I would take that with a pinch of salt, because basically NASA have been known to be a little bit economical with the truth in the past. Let's just say that. Okay, so there we are, the Mars asparagus, or what I'm calling it is the Asparagus Cacti, because it sticks up just like an asparagus, and it's probably a cacti. I can't prove it's a cacti, but I would hazard a guess it probably is, due to the conditions and terrain, very similar to some of the desert cacti we have. This is fairly small. I would say it's probably only about 4 inches, possibly only 2. I don't know exactly. Let's quickly look at it on the Gigapan and see if we can work it out. Now, the rover's down here, obviously, and then looking at this ridge line. So this is pretty small. I would say it's less than 4 inches. This bit. I would say that could be 2 or 3 or even 1. I really don't know, because I don't know how far the rover has zoomed the camera. It may not have zoomed it at all. So there we are, and the rover's down here, obviously, and it's looking over to there. I would say about 3 or 4 inches, but maybe only 2. Okay, so there we are. So we have that image, we have the enhancement here. Let's have one more look at that. Those roots go into the water here, or wet sand, I should say. There we are, and it comes right round like that. It comes around like that. You've got this nice wet patch, and the roots going right into the sand just there. Unbelievable. So there was one other plant I was going to show you actually, which was this one. Now this is one I published on my channel in 2014, in June, summer 2014. One of my first really interesting plant finds, I think, on the surface of Mars. And this one actually has what seem to be leaves on it. Okay, I've got it here. Let's have a close look at that. Now, it's not great detail. This is also very small. This is probably only about 3 or 4 inches, but it's further away from the rover, so it appears very small in the image. And it has leaves. Got one here, another one here, another possible one here. But some of these things may be behind it. There's something behind it here which is obscuring the image slightly up here. But there's another one sticking up there. There's one like a limb sticking out there. Something sticking up here. And we've got some interesting details in here on the trunk. I think this is probably a cacti with leaves. Different type of cacti. Really cool. And I don't know what species this is. Nothing quite like it on Earth, but I would hazard a guess it's probably another type of cacti because of the conditions. Not many other plants would survive in this terrain. It's just far too dry. Interesting details in here. We've got these kind of weird parts to it here, these holes and kind of parts to it here. Very interesting. So there's something going on there, but when you get in too close, it's hard to see. In fact, it looks quite good in the raw clip here. You can see that what they're like nostrils on it and things like that. I don't think they are nostrils, but they're holes. So it's got some kind of structure to it. But this looks like a limb or arm coming out. This one comes right up like that. This one comes right out. This one's almost hand-shaped or leaf-shaped. So we got parts, you know. So I think that's a plant. I did speculate at one point, I thought it could be a strange rock with a creature actually sat on it, basking with its legs out. But I think that's less likely. But who knows? This is Mars after all. We shouldn't rule anything out, because so far almost everything has been found in this area, including buildings, vehicles, plants, animals, and even humanoids. Okay? Unfortunately, most of them are not alive. 99.9% of them are dead. This is one of the few examples of something that looks living on Mars. Absolutely amazing. So I'm really proud of this find. I'm going to send this to the press and hopefully they'll print it and show it, because I think this is a really important image. So thanks for watching, everybody. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you soon.